So we're going to give a little demonstration of pruning here. It may be a group pruning demonstration in that I'll make some cuts and the peanut gallery here may shout out something else that we should do. One of the great things about pruning trees is that you try to make the best cut you can, but there's usually no exactly perfect cut. And if you make a mistake, the tree grows back, unless you do a really bad job. So there's always room to debate, but we're going to talk about some key philosophies and how you approach a tree like this on Gisela roots, very productive, and some of the decisions that you would make. First of all, I believe that we would want to talk about making sure we've got light in the tree. There's two main cuts we're going to make here today, and that is cuts to improve the light throughout the tree to keep productive wood in the lower part of the tree and back towards the trunk, because it's easy to grow fruit in the light, it's harder to grow fruit in the shade, so we want to eliminate as much of that shade as possible. Then secondly, we'll talk about how we tip new shoots to balance the future crop load, to make sure that we're always stimulating good new vegetative leaf area and limiting the ability of the tree to produce heavy clusters, as Lynn Long described just a moment ago, that tend to form towards the terminal of previous season's growth. One of the contrasts we've got in this orchard with the last orchard we were in, which was, if you saw that clip, a very simplified V trellis. We had two main leaders and we had about 13 laterals, short laterals off each of those leaders. So it was a highly structured tree. It had great labor efficiencies when you'd move through that tree and have to make pruning decisions. Here we have a much more chaotic tree. Really, it's about the same height overall as the V tree, but it's going to take me a little time to evaluate each branch because each branch is quite different. Some are more horizontal, some are upright, some are vigorous, some have a little less vigor. And the fact that I have to move a ladder in and out of this tree is going to slow me down significantly. So, just a couple of key points for the different systems we're looking at, very structured systems as well as a little bit less structured. You can produce good quality fruit and good yields on each, but there are labor efficiencies to be had early in the training system when you're creating that simplified structure, and later if you've put less effort in the front end, then you have a lot of effort later on when you're pruning the tree. So we want to start out by making our big cuts first. And you can see this has a very nice tier of lower fruit, another tier, and then we get up towards the top and it's a little bit narrower. And so we want to make sure those tiers stay nice and distinct. And that means that this branch here, that I've sort of covered up with the ladder, is kind of growing out of its tier location, the area that we've allocated to that branch. So we want to cut it and keep the tier at this level and not let it go beyond where it should be. So we're going to start out and make a number of those types of cuts to make sure we keep our tiers in their area and maintain our lower light. So I've taken care of the first tier. Another nice factor in this orchard is that you see this wire here. This is for a row cover, for rain cracking protection. And so that has actually probably benefited this orchard in that it's forced the development of the trees to be low enough to accommodate that rain structure. The first orchard that we looked at today would probably have been too tall for such a rain structure. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take this whole thing where I had branches coming back in towards the center that we're going to shade. Now I expect that I'll stimulate really high quality fruit right here in these spurs, and we'll stimulate some lateral branches to continue to fill in this tier. We've got some branches here filling in this tier, which will tip. And I'll need to move my ladder to get closer and deal with this part up here. I'll tip this one here, but you can see just with a couple of cuts and a couple of tipping in here, we've created a very nice open tier. We've got light coming back close to the trunk. And now I'll come down off the ladder, move it out of the way, and finish off this side. Then I'll have to move the ladder around to another area. So there you can see just on this side of the tree how we've opened it up relatively nicely. I've got some potential shade over here where I've got branches coming together. I'm not going to deal with this tree here, but I'll deal with this one. And there I've got a very nice tier there. Good strong spurs, good light, and the fact that I've made some cuts will stimulate some new growth in that area. Work over here. Debate whether to take this out, but I'll be a little bit greedy probably and go ahead and leave that for now. I've already tipped it, and I don't think it's going to shade out this lower branch here if I get rid of this shady branch here. So I'll fruit this another year or two, and then we'll be coming back in and taking that out. In the meantime, I've got good fruiting wood here. So there's always a debate that you have, particularly as you get up into a nice fruiting branch here. There's going to be a lot of good fruit on here, but at what cost down the road? Do I leave it another year and fruit it and then come back in and cut it? Or do I go ahead and cut it to make sure I'm always got good light here and stimulate some new growth? So I need to do something here to make sure it doesn't get too big. Here where I've got a branch coming back in, it's a good decision point for eliminating that. And there I've opened up this top tier. Now we're going to have to move the ladder again, and this is a point with the non-simplified structures. Also, if I did this for a living, I probably would be better at setting my ladder. I'll have to move this and cut this branch over here. I'll need to move the ladder again to cut the tops out of this branch. But it's giving you an idea of what we need to do for a tree like this. Talking with Lynn a little bit ago, we said if we were running a crew through here, we would assign one pruner the goal of going through and making these bigger cuts for light. And then we would assign a second pruner the goal of coming through and doing these tippings so that we balance that crop load. That way you simplified the instructions for the labor. Labor can make very quick decisions. All I have to do is think about is the big cuts, and the guy coming behind me, all they have to do is think about the tipping. If you're doing this in a structured orchard on a mobile platform, you can have the person on the front of the platform making the big cuts and the person on the back of the platform making the tipping type cuts. So that's about all I can reach from setting my ladder there. So where we're at is I've been up in the top of the ladder pruning this tree, make it narrow at the top, make sure I've got light coming through, tipping, new shoots that it gave me nice growth last year, and removing some big wood. I've come down the ladder, I've looked at it, I've already gone back up once and said there was something up there that I didn't see when I was up there that I've changed. Lynn here has been watching the whole thing, watching how the tree developed, and he's got some other views on different ways that it could be handled. And so we're going to turn it over to Lynn.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Greg. As Greg said earlier, there's always a number of different ways that you can prune a tree, and in reality, they can both be right. I just have a couple of comments. I really like the way that this tree has been formed now, so that now we've got a pyramidal tree, a Christmas tree. shaped tree, so that you've got branches that are smaller at the top, and you've got branches that are coming out further from the trunk down here, and that gives you good light penetration down at the bottom of this tree, so that we can maintain the spur development and the fruit development down here, and we don't lose the bottom of the tree. That's really, really important. We've got a large branch up there at the top of the tree. Greg cut it back about 2.5 feet from the trunk. I would have been more severe with that. That's a big branch in the top of the tree. I think there's two options when you have a branch that size in the top of the tree. One is to stub it back maybe about 12 inches, and you will get new growth from that. You'll get a regrowth from that as long as there is light hitting that cut. And that's not a problem in the top of the tree. So if you stub that back to about 12 inches, you're going to get new growth from that. The other possibility of how you deal with that, because it's so big in the top of the tree, you don't want that to dominate. And if I stub that off, I'm going to get a vigorous regrowth right there on the top of the tree, which is exactly where I don't want the vigor on this tree. So the other way is to cut it off completely, is just to remove it. It probably should have been a cut that was made last year, maybe the year before, to stub that back. But now it's way too big for the top of the tree, and stubbing it back, whether it's 2 feet or 12 inches, is going to leave a lot of vigor in the top of the tree. So probably the best option there is to remove it completely. Another branch that I really do like that is at the top of the tree, Greg left this branch coming off to the left there. He left it untipped. And I think that's exactly what you should do. There were a couple of branches at the top of this tree that were vertical. He removed those completely. They were new shoots. He removed those completely, and that was great, because the vertical top of the tree, a lot of power in that part of the tree. We don't want that. This branch that he left is coming off at a horizontal angle and then going up, and it has less vigor than those two that he cut off. In addition to that, he did not tip that branch. Tipping branches invigorates those branches. Leaving them alone, especially at the top of the tree, will cause that branch to slow down and to fruit up, and it will cause less shade then down at the bottom of the tree, and that's really important, especially in the top of these trees.
I want to take a look at this branch, as we can see where the pruning stub cut was made last year. Let's take these. So you see last year the kinds of tipping that I was doing here was done here. It stimulated 3 very nice flat branches. It's filling this space well. It removed any heavy cluster that would have been forming out here in the next year. And you've got very nice, strong, healthy spur buds here. Ultimately, we don't want this, but I'm kind of greedy and I'm leaving it so we'll get a little bit of fruit there. The other thing I would probably do after I did this tipping or before, I probably would have come back in and removed that center one. So we've got this spaced out better, down to 2 coming off of last year's cuts instead of 3. But that was a nice illustration, so I'm glad I left it until this point.
And you can, by tipping this vertical shoot here, as Greg mentioned, you can grow some nice fruit. Your largest fruit and your firmest fruit is going to be grown at the base of 1-year-old wood. And so where you can keep that, you want to keep it. If he had left this shoot as vertical as it is, it may have gotten very powerful, because it's an upright shoot. So you don't want to do that. But you can come in here and you can tip this, grow some fruit off of this for 1 year. Your largest, firmest fruit and the fruit with the most sugar is going to be right here. And so maintain that if you can. And so that's a great cut right there.
That's one of the reasons we stress getting good vigor every year, because when you've got good vigor with new shoots, then you're building this population of the basal fruit that gives you the largest, sweetest, firmest fruit. Well, one thing that we didn't talk about that Jose has done in this orchard is we're talking about all of this pruning being done in late summer so that we don't get regrowth in the summertime, we avoid bacterial canker issues, and then we get the growth responses next spring that we're looking for, that typically we've talked about doing those kinds of cuts in the winter. But the thing that Jose has done that we haven't talked about is, you notice how nice he's got open tiers here. He has gone through before harvest and done some selective pruning to remove upright water sprouts that would be causing shade or pendant wood that would be causing shade. So we've talked about concentrating the pruning in late summer here for the structure of the tree and balancing the crop load. But there was also some pre-harvest pruning done that we haven't illustrated that is what led to this nice open tier throughout the tree.
And I think that's a really important topic that Greg brought up just now, is especially on these productive rootstocks, Gisela 6, Gisela 12, Crimps 5, Crimp 6, any of those productive rootstocks, you cannot have pendant wood and grow large size fruit. So as Greg said, Jose has done a great job coming in here and removing the pendant wood. We don't see any pendant wood in this block. So it's important that you remove pendant wood and any weak wood in these trees on these types of rootstocks. Otherwise, they'll produce small fruit, and it's the fruit that ends up as culls. You won't get money for it, and it just slows the tree down. You don't want that with these types of rootstocks.